Every family has a language that is never spoken aloud. It lives in the pauses between conversations, in the eyes that turn away before tears can gather, in the laughter that arrives a little too loudly to hide an older ache. Before you knew your own name, you inherited stories that were already unfolding. Some wrapped themselves around you like warm blankets. Others became invisible weights you learned to carry without ever asking why they were there. We are taught to believe that family is something we understand simply because we belong to it. But belonging is not the same as seeing. Sometimes the people closest to us become the greatest mysteries because we have spent a lifetime looking at them through the narrow window of expectation instead of the wide horizon of truth. We remember who they were when we were children, yet forget they were once children themselves, carrying dreams interrupted, fears unnamed, and battles no one applauded. There comes a moment in every life when the old picture begins to crack. The parent who seemed unshakable reveals quiet exhaustion. The sibling you judged too quickly becomes a mirror reflecting your own unspoken fears. The grandparent whose silence once felt distant begins to sound like a language of survival. Suddenly, the family you thought you knew is no longer a collection of familiar faces, but a living history of hope, sacrifice, mistakes, resilience, and love that often arrived wearing imperfect clothes. This is not a story about placing blame where understanding should live. It is not about pretending wounds never existed or asking you to ignore the moments that changed your heart. It is about looking deeper than the surface, beyond the arguments remembered and the disappointments repeated, until you discover the humanity that has always been standing quietly behind every role. Because mothers are more than mothers, fathers are more than fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. They are souls shaped by journeys you may never have witnessed. Today, you are invited to step beyond habit and into vision, to see not only what your family has done, but what it has endured, to recognize the invisible threads connecting generations, the burdens passed from one hand to another, and the extraordinary courage it takes for even one person to choose a different path. By the time this journey ends, you may discover that the greatest transformation is not changing your family at all. It is changing the way you see them, the way you understand yourself, and the legacy you decide to leave behind. Every family carries stories that are never written down. They are not found in old photographs, official records, or treasured heirlooms. They live instead in habits, expressions, silences, and traditions passed from one generation to the next. A child enters the world believing the atmosphere of home is simply the way life is meant to feel. If laughter fills the rooms, the child learns that joy is natural. If fear lingers in quiet corners, the child may grow believing caution is the safest companion. These lessons are rarely spoken aloud, yet they become some of the most powerful influences a person will ever know. Silence is one of the most mysterious storytellers within a family. It has the ability to preserve love, but it can also preserve pain. Some families avoid difficult conversations because they believe speaking about hardship will only deepen it. Others remain quiet because they have survived seasons where silence was the only form of protection they possessed. Over time, what begins as a shield can become a wall. separating hearts that long to understand one another. Questions remain unasked. Feelings remain unnamed. The next generation inherits not only the silence itself, but also the confusion it creates. High stories often explain behaviors that otherwise seem impossible to understand. A parent who struggles to express affection may have grown up without ever receiving it. A grandparent who values sacrifice above comfort may remember years when survival demanded impossible choices. A sibling who constantly seeks approval may carry invisible fears planted long before anyone noticed. Without knowing these stories, it is easy to judge actions only by their appearance. With understanding, those same actions begin to reveal a deeper history of struggle, resilience, and hope. Generations are connected in ways that cannot always be seen. Joy is passed down through celebrations, shared meals, songs, and traditions that remind people they belong to something greater than themselves. Pain travels differently. It moves through repeated patterns, unresolved conflicts, and beliefs that quietly shape how love is given or withheld. A family may unknowingly repeat the same emotional cycle for decades, not because its members lack goodness, but because they have never paused long enough to recognize the pattern. What remains hidden often remains powerful, yet hidden stories are not only about suffering. They also contain remarkable examples of courage that deserve to be remembered. Somewhere in every family tree is a person who chose kindness instead of bitterness, generosity instead of selfishness, perseverance instead of surrender. Their quiet decisions became the foundation upon which future generations would stand. These victories may never receive public recognition, but they continue to echo through everyday acts of compassion, integrity, and resilience. To truly know a family requires more than remembering birthdays or sharing the same last name. It requires curiosity instead of assumption, listening instead of rushing to judgment, and compassion strong enough to hold both truth and tenderness at the same time. When hidden stories are gently brought into the light, they lose much of their power to divide. Understanding begins to replace resentment. Empathy softens old conclusions. And people discover that beneath years of silence, there has always been a longing to be seen, understood, and remembered. Love and pain often grow from the same roots, because the people who have the greatest power to shape our hearts are also the people who have the greatest ability to wound them. Family is where many of us first experience comfort, belonging, encouragement, and protection. It is also where we may first encounter disappointment, misunderstanding, criticism, or loss. These experiences become intertwined so deeply that it is often impossible to separate one from the other. The memories that make us smile can exist alongside memories that still ache, reminding us that the deepest relationships are rarely simple. A child does not ask for perfect parents. A child simply longs to be seen, heard, and loved. Most parents begin their journey with genuine hope, wanting to offer a better life than the one they received. Yet every adult carries unseen burdens, unfinished healing, and lessons learned through their own struggles. Sometimes those burdens quietly influence the way love is expressed. Affection may become difficult to show. Patience may disappear under stress. Words intended as guidance may sound like judgment. The love is present, but it arrives wrapped in fear, exhaustion, or expectations that neither side fully understands. This does not mean that every painful experience should be excused or ignored. Pain deserves to be acknowledged honestly, because pretending it never happened only allows it to settle deeper into the heart. At the same time, understanding where pain comes from can transform how we carry it. When we begin to recognize that those who hurt us were often shaped by wounds of their own, we do not erase responsibility, but we gain a wider perspective. Compassion becomes possible without denying the truth. Families often pass down emotional habits without realizing it. A grandfather who never learned to express tenderness may raise children who mistake silence for strength. Those children may later struggle to communicate openly with their own families, believing that love should be understood rather than spoken. Over generations, the pattern continues, not because people lack affection, but because they have inherited a language that cannot easily express it. The absence of words can leave hearts full of love, feeling painfully distant from one another. Yet even within broken moments, love continues to reveal itself in unexpected ways. It appears in sacrifices that go unnoticed, in long hours of work to provide security, in meals prepared after exhausting days, in quiet prayers, whispered for children who may never hear them. Love does not always arrive in perfect sentences or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it survives through simple acts of persistence, choosing to remain present even when relationships become difficult. Recognizing these expressions does not erase hurt, but it reminds us that human love is often imperfect rather than absent. As we grow older, we gain the opportunity to look beyond our childhood understanding of family. We begin to see our parents, siblings, and relatives not as flawless heroes or permanent villains, but as human beings carrying their own histories, dreams, disappointments, and unanswered questions. This shift in perspective creates room for healing because it replaces rigid labels with deeper understanding. It allows us to honor the love that existed, confront the pain that remains, and recognize that both can occupy the same story without canceling each other, leaving space for grace to quietly reshape the way future generations experience love and belonging. Every family passes something from one generation to the next. Sometimes it is wisdom, resilience, generosity, and faith. Other times it is fear, anger, silence, or habits that quietly limit the lives of those who inherit them. These patterns often become so familiar that they feel normal. A person may promise never to repeat the mistakes they witnessed as a child, only to discover years later that they are responding to stress with the very same words, emotions, or behaviors they once wished to escape. Inherited patterns are powerful because they are learned long before we are old enough to question them. Breaking these patterns begins with awareness. It requires the courage to pause in moments that usually happen without thought. Instead of reacting automatically, we learn to ask ourselves why we respond the way we do. Is this truly our own belief? Or is it something we accepted because it surrounded us for years? This kind of reflection is uncomfortable because it asks us to look honestly at the influences that shaped us. Yet it is also the first step toward genuine freedom. What remains unconscious often continues to control us, but what becomes visible can finally be changed. Choosing a different path does not mean rejecting the people who raised us. It means recognizing that love and growth can exist together. A son can appreciate his father's sacrifices while deciding to communicate with greater patience. A daughter can admire her mother's strength while refusing to carry the burden of constant self-sacrifice. Honoring our family does not require repeating every habit they passed down. Sometimes the greatest tribute we can offer is to build upon their efforts and continue the healing they may have longed for, but never had the opportunity to complete. Compassion is essential during this journey because anger alone cannot create lasting transformation. It is easy to blame previous generations for every struggle we face. It is much harder to imagine the circumstances that shaped them. Many lived with pressures, fears, or hardships that demanded survival above emotional understanding. They made choices based on the knowledge and resources available to them. Recognizing this truth does not erase the consequences of harmful actions, but it prevents bitterness from becoming another inheritance passed to the next generation. Breaking inherited patterns also requires patience with ourselves. Lasting change rarely happens in a single decision. There will be moments when old habits return, when familiar reactions rise before new ones have taken root. These moments are not signs of failure, but reminders that transformation is a process. Every time we choose honesty over denial, listening over shouting, forgiveness over resentment, or understanding over assumption, we strengthen a new path that becomes easier to follow with time. The remarkable truth is that one person's decision to change can influence generations yet to come. A single act of kindness can interrupt a cycle of harshness. One honest conversation can replace decades of silence. One choice to seek healing can create a home where children grow up feeling safe to express themselves without fear. The legacy we leave is shaped not only by what we inherit, but also by what we decide to carry forward and what we choose to leave behind, allowing future generations to receive a foundation built with greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and a clearer understanding of what love is capable of becoming. One of the greatest signs of emotional maturity is the ability to see the people closest to us as human beings, instead of simply the roles they play in our lives. As children, we often view our parents as larger than life. They seem to have all the answers, all the authority, and all the responsibility. Our siblings become fixed in our minds as the funny one, the responsible one, the rebellious one, or the quiet one. These labels feel permanent because they are formed during the years when our understanding of the world is still developing. But as we grow older, we are given the opportunity to look beyond those familiar roles and discover the individuals who have always existed beneath them. A mother is more than the person who prepared meals or reminded us to be careful. She is also someone who once had dreams that stretched far beyond the walls of her home. She may have faced disappointments she never spoke about, sacrifices she never announced, and fears she carried in silence so her children could feel secure. A father is more than the person who worked long hours or enforced rules. He may have struggled with expectations placed upon him, questioned his own decisions, and carried burdens he believed he had to bear alone. Seeing these hidden dimensions does not diminish their role as parents. Instead, it deepens our appreciation for the complexity of their lives. The same is true for brothers and sisters. The sibling who always seemed confident may have secretly battled insecurity. The one who appeared distant may have been protecting themselves from emotions they did not know how to express. Every family member carries an inner world that remains invisible unless we choose to approach them with curiosity instead of assumption. When we stop believing we already know everything about the people closest to us, we create space for genuine understanding to grow. This shift in perspective also changes the way we interpret conflict. Instead of seeing every disagreement as proof that someone does not care, we begin to recognize that people often react from places of exhaustion, fear, or unresolved pain. Harsh words may reflect stress more than hatred. Silence may reveal uncertainty rather than indifference. While hurtful behavior should never be excused, understanding its source allows us to respond with greater wisdom instead of immediate judgment. We begin to ask what experiences shaped the person standing before us instead of focusing only on the moment that caused disappointment. Viewing family members as imperfect human beings also frees us from unrealistic expectations. No parent can meet every emotional need. No sibling can always understand us. No relative can consistently make the right decisions. Expecting perfection from imperfect people creates frustration for everyone involved. Accepting their humanity does not lower the value of the relationship. Instead, it replaces impossible standards with realistic compassion, allowing love to breathe without being crushed under the weight of constant disappointment. When we embrace this deeper way of seeing, our relationships begin to change in quiet but meaningful ways. Conversations become less about proving who is right and more about listening with patience. Forgiveness becomes easier because we recognize that every person is carrying a story we may never fully know. Gratitude grows as we notice the sacrifices that once seemed ordinary, and respect deepens when we realize that those we called family have been learning, struggling, hoping, and healing alongside us for far longer than we ever imagined, revealing that the strongest relationships are built not on perfection, but on understanding, grace, and the willingness to truly see one another for who they are. Healing within a family does not begin when everyone suddenly agrees or when every painful memory disappears. It begins with a decision. It is the quiet choice to stop allowing yesterday's wounds to dictate tomorrow's relationships. This decision is not always easy, because pain has a way of convincing us that protecting ourselves means building walls around our hearts. Yet walls that keep hurt out often keep love out as well. True healing asks us to replace fear with wisdom, bitterness with understanding, and hopelessness with the belief that change is possible. Even if it comes one small step at a time, forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many believe it means pretending that nothing happened or excusing behavior that caused deep pain. In reality, forgiveness is neither denial nor approval. It is the willingness to release the constant burden of carrying resentment. Holding on to anger may feel like justice at first, but over time it becomes a weight that drains joy, peace, and emotional strength. Forgiveness does not erase the past, nor does it always restore broken relationships. Instead, it frees the heart from remaining trapped in moments that can never be changed, allowing space for hope to grow where bitterness once lived. Choosing healing also requires honesty. Families cannot overcome hidden wounds if no one is willing to acknowledge they exist. Honest conversations, spoken with kindness and respect, have the power to open doors that silence kept closed for years. These conversations are not about winning arguments or assigning blame. They are opportunities to express feelings with humility, to listen without preparing a defense, and to understand experiences that may have been overlooked for far too long. Sometimes a single sincere conversation becomes the beginning of a completely different future. Personal growth plays an equally important role in this journey. We cannot control the choices of others, but we can take responsibility for our own responses. Every day presents opportunities to become more patient, more compassionate, and more aware of the habits we carry into our relationships. Instead of repeating words that once wounded us, we can choose encouragement. Instead of responding with silence, we can choose honest communication. Instead of assuming the worst, we can choose curiosity and empathy. These decisions may seem small, but over time they create a new emotional environment where trust has room to grow. Healing is rarely immediate. There will be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when old patterns try to return. Progress does not always move in a straight line. Some relationships may require healthy boundaries, while others may need time before trust can be rebuilt. Choosing healing does not mean abandoning wisdom. It means balancing compassion with discernment, recognizing that love can exist alongside appropriate limits. In this balance, people learn to care for others without losing themselves in the process. The greatest gift of choosing healing is that its impact extends far beyond the present moment. Children learn from the examples they witnessed. Friends are influenced by the peace they observe. Future generations inherit not only traditions and memories, but also healthier ways of communicating, loving, and resolving conflict. A single person's commitment to growth can become the turning point that changes an entire family's story. What once seemed like an endless cycle of hurt can gradually become a legacy of understanding, resilience, kindness, and hope, creating a future where love is expressed with greater courage, deeper wisdom, and a lasting commitment to nurture hearts, instead of repeating the wounds of the past.